Yeah, no. Okay, yeah, this guy's being dishonest. All right. I was waiting to do this video. I really was waiting to do this video. How Ukraine's fake culture war become a real geopolitical conflict. This is a 4-part series, so this is a lot about what I talk about. So yeah, but I was waiting for the perfect time to do this.
What if
and it has
war
arrived
between Russia and Ukraine? Could a nation roughly the size of Texas stand a fighting chance against Russia's military might? Tom Foreman joins me now. Tom?
As a simple answer, Jake, no.
I don't know how this video is gonna do on the algorithm. YouTube tends to censor my stuff a lot when it comes to like modern conflicts, so I don't know how well this video is gonna do, but we'll see.
Until the bombs started dropping, no one thought Ukraine was worth understanding. The past 10 years of Ukrainian history have been the site of some of the worst journalistic malpractice of the 21st century, on par with the run-up to the Iraq War. And now, like in Iraq, tens of thousands of people are dying. And now that everyone is paying attention, they're doing so from a place of zero context.
And this is after the war in Donbass, by the way. This is during.
Wait.
Huh?
Okay, wait. What is the war in Donbass?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked.
And so it's not surprising.
Oh shit. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah. Literally 90% of people don't even know that it started in 2014. I knew it started in 2014. I've been keeping track of this conflict since I was a teenager. I'm 20 years old now. I've been keeping track of this conflict since I was a kid, where nobody didn't even know Ukraine existed. Oh shit. Yo. That's insane. And even then, back then, like, I was being fed this conflict from a freaking Western point of view. So me being a kid, I just took it at face value. And for a little bit, I was brainwashed by this stupid Western propaganda regarding this whole conflict. You know, I was a kid, didn't know any better, and I just took it at face value, of course. However, there were some things that, even when it was brainwashed, I kind of noticed, and it kind of stuck with me. And this would eventually, as I got older, lead to me realizing like everything. But I'm gonna talk about that more in the video. But just keep that in mind.
Surprising that even the people who should have known better got so much completely wrong. And so the first question I'd like to ask is, why? Why did everyone assume, most importantly the Russians, that Ukraine was just too divided to fight back?
This area that we've been talking about so much, as the general pointed out, they don't really need to go into this area because it's so heavily Russian anyway. It's a problem for Western Ukraine.
This is one part of a 4-part series. Please subscribe and stick with me on this, because this is going to go some crazy places, but I promise I'm going to show you sides of the story that no one else has showed you. So we start in 2000.
Yeah, I'm gonna have a lot of clips from my TikTok page.
The typical post-communist story. Optimism, privatizations, economic crisis, oligarchs, IMF structural adjustment programs, unsteady recovery, and a strongman leader. And in the early 2000s, Ukraine's strongman, Leonid Kuchma, was having a bad time. His bodyguard had just released a secret 500-hour recording of all of his office hours. A recording in which not only did he solicit bribes, threaten politicians, discuss strategies to rig elections, and authorize the sale of an illegal weapon to Saddam Hussein, he also asked his security minister to take care of a troublesome journalist. Which is a very bad thing to be heard saying about a journalist 3 months before his decapitated corpse is discovered in the woods. People were fed up.
Yeah, you know, it's funny, right? People... this is before Yanukovych. Again, remember what I said in my video regarding, like, why do you still support Ukraine? What was the first thing that I said? corrupted as hell. Corrupted as hell. Ukraine was corrupted, so corrupted. Basically, like, immediately after the fall of the USSR. Oh, but corruption is normal, bruh. Okay, so why is it that people can say, oh, Russia's such a bad country, it's so corrupted, look at Russia, oh, Russia's so corrupted, but when it's Ukraine, it's, oh, well, tee-hee, well, it is what it is. Oh, that's nothing. Oh, corruption is everywhere. You see the double standards? Yo, I got a lot to say in this video. Holy shit, bro. We're only 3 minutes in. But I'm just saying, think about that for a second. Think about that.
But even more dangerously, two of Kuchma's subordinates had become decidedly more popular than him. Viktor Yushchenko was a neoliberal economist who had run the central bank in the 90s and developed a reputation for being unusually honest. When Kuchma found his government insolvent and completely cut off by both the IMF and the private sector, he put Yushchenko in charge of finding money. Yushchenko in turn put a woman named Yulia Tymoshenko in charge of finding it in the energy sector. Yulia Tymoshenko had been the oligarch with a near monopoly on importing natural gas from Russia. But when the political winds changed, she was pushed out, investigated multiple times, and lost most of her money. So she reinvented herself as an anti-oligarch oligarch. The politician who could make the other energy oligarchs pay because she knew the ropes. She managed to close $4 billion a year's worth of loopholes by which energy oligarchs were milking the government dry. And Yushchenko took the money and used it to pay down money owed to pensioners. In a country mired in enough corruption, a tight-fisted conservative neoliberal can become a populist hero.
That is crazy.
If Kuchma was going to win his next election, he was going to need to get rid of the two of them without generating a backlash. So first he tried to split them up by forcing Yushchenko to fire Tymoshenko, and then he put Tymoshenko in jail. When that didn't work, he just fired Yushchenko, but Yushchenko immediately formed an opposition party which immediately went to the top of the polls. And when that didn't work, Kuchma realized he was not going to win re-election. So he decided to pick a successor that could run against Yushchenko. That candidate ended up being his current prime minister, Viktor Yanukovich. But Viktor Yanukovych was a former street tough with no real campaigning skills and zero charisma. So instead of trying to win on charm, he turned the race into a linguistic culture war.
Viktor Andreevich, if you think that you will win and you will become the president of Ukraine, you are deeply mistaken. If you win, you can become the president of part of Ukraine.
Blunting Yushchenko's anti-corruption message by spreading rumors that he was going to split the country and possibly ban the Russian language or even ban the Russian Orthodox Church.
Nobody will be closing any Russian language schools. Third, nobody will be dividing Ukraine into three sorts of Ukrainians, as was suggested on placards, on posters in Kyiv and most of Ukraine, which were put up, by the way, by pro-government forces. Crimea will always belong to Crimeans and Ukraine. Nobody will be surrounding Luhansk and Donetsk with barbed wire. You're a serious person. Don't repeat these myths. Unity of Ukraine, let's consider it.
Yo, I could just do nothing but laugh. 2004, they said all that. Holy shit, bro. Yep. Oh! Yeah, Crimea belongs to Ukraine. Well, not anymore. And they caused that on themselves. Literally caused that on themselves, bruh. Donbass, again, two Minsk agreements. Two Minsk agreements went absolutely nowhere. Once again, caused that upon itself. You know, it's funny how people don't talk about that. about the whole like Donbass conflict and the fact that they like the whole agreement of the Minsk agreement was to reintegrate the Donbass into Ukraine proper. Like people think like Russia sent MPs in Donbass. That's what people will say. Okay, well, if Russia sent MPs in Donbass, why was the peace agreement, which was heavily brokered by Russia, by the way, why would the main point of the peace agreement to reintegrate Donbass in Ukraine? That was the whole end goal of the two Minsk agreements that failed. Why wasn't it like full-on independence for Donbass or like full-on annexation to Russia? No, it was to re-enter Ukraine. But nobody questions that. And not a single soul.
A holy temple.
They just sit there and just eat up stupid propaganda despite being grown-ass adults and who can't use basic common sense and just get themselves brainwashed. It's stupid.
Which every politician should guard. And when he loses, he shouldn't run to a neighboring country and say, let's play the card of separatism, federalism, let's create a southern and eastern republic.
Now, you've probably heard some things about Ukraine being divided between Russians and Ukrainians, and that's partially true but misleading. In reality, everyone in Ukraine speaks Russian, and about 70% of Ukrainians speak Ukrainian. When people say Russians or ethnic Russians or Russian speakers, they mean the segment of the population that can't speak Ukrainian. The real divide in Ukraine is a three-way split between ethnic Ukrainian nationalists in the far west, the professional middle class based in Kyiv, who tended towards Russian because you needed it to advance in the Soviet bureaucracy, and the Russophone east of the country, which was previously the Soviet Union's industrial heartland and is now Ukraine's Rust Belt. The first group tended towards Yulia Tymoshenko, the second towards Yushchenko, and the third group towards Viktor Yanukovych. But since all three of them had come out of the same administration and were all pursuing basically the same economic and foreign policies, Yanukovych was going to need a deeper issue to act as a wedge between Yushchenko and the east of the country. And he found the United States.
The people you liberate will witness the honorable and decent spirit of the American military.
In 2004, the US's global reputation was plummeting, and Yushchenko's wife was American. So the regime-controlled media portrayed Yushchenko as a puppet of America who wanted to tear Ukraine away from Russia and put it in NATO. This was a weird accusation, because it was Kuchma who had desperately wanted to get Ukraine in NATO, going so far as to send 1,000 soldiers to Iraq as a bribe to George Bush. But Kuchma controlled TV, so it stuck, and it attracted Ukraine's anti-Russian far right to Yushchenko's cause. This in turn made the East nervous, not so much because of any worry about ethnic violence, but more because Ukrainian nationalism feels like an attack on their cultural self-identity, as the people who liberated Ukraine from Hitler, rather than the people who conquered Ukraine for Stalin. This is all to say that the divide in Ukraine is more like a US-style culture war than a Balkan-style ethnic struggle. For politicians and oligarchs, it's mostly just a tool for cynically juking voter turnout. A farce.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's why you see Ukrainians worshipping America like if it's Jesus Christ. I'll never understand that. But I'm gonna talk more about that in the video though.
Вони будуть плямувати моє ім'я, моїх друзів, що я фашист, що я нацик, що я не люблю Росії. Ви знаєте?
But the Kremlin wasn't in on the joke. Kuchma successfully convinced them to see Yushchenko as a threat, so Russia donated $300 million to Yanukovych's campaign and sent him their best campaign professionals. And they started running as many ads as they could for Yanukovych.
Наші діти будуть пишатися Україною.
Дитячі долоні будуть в надійних руках.
Віктор Янукович.
When that didn't seem to work, Russia got the Patriarch of the Orthodox Church to endorse Yanukovych. And finally, when it was clear that none of this was going to stop Yushchenko, they just tried to murder him.
Doctors confirmed that opposition candidate Viktor Yushchenko was poisoned during the campaign.
Ющенка відчував значне погіршення загального стану, почалася сильна рвота.
He claims to have been poisoned in September.
His face almost overnight changed into a scarred, bloated mass.
The government said he must have eaten some bad sushi.
And so when
Yeah. He must have ate some bad sushi. He must have ate some bad sushi.
even that didn't work, they just decided to rig the election.
The country's election commission ignored reports of fraud, declaring Kremlin-backed Viktor Yanukovych the winner.
The problem, of course, with all those failed attempts to bias the outcome is that they were so transparently desperate that everyone realized they were going to rig the election before they did it. So when there was a 10-point difference between the exit polls and the official returns, no one needed to sit around waiting for an investigation.
Цієї нашої команди звертаюсь до вас, щоб завтра о 9 годині ранку на площі Незалежності зібралися
Hundreds of thousands of pro-democracy Ukrainians in the streets today protested against the results of the presidential election.
Demonstrators clashed with police, hundreds of thousands protesting the results of the election and calling for a new vote.
Lukashenko has called for a nationwide strike, warning the country is on the verge of civil war.
If they shoot us, if they send tanks, no matter what, there's nothing that can overpower the will of the people.
And this is like one of the reasons why I can't just I can't really like, I have so many reasons why I just cannot side with Ukraine, but one of the reasons being like the war, the whole conflict is a scam. I'm talking about the whole conflict that's going on right now in 2025. It's a scam. It's a scam. A big scam. There are a very minority of amount of Ukrainians who know that it's a scam. But most Ukrainians don't know that it's a scam. Zelensky is a joke. He's literally a de facto dictator. Not even de facto dictator. He pretty much is a dictator at this point. This conflict can literally end, and it can end if Zelensky just leaves. If he just leaves. Now, obviously, there's more to it than that, but that's literally like one of Russia's main demand. Like, Zelensky, he has to go. You gotta go. You gotta go. But let's just put Russia out. Just leave Russia out. Remember in that video when I said that Ukraine basically like is basically like an extraction colony of the US? Well, you know, so many Ukrainians, right, who started to see the surface level of the bullshit that was going on, because that's what it was, frankly speaking, and they started saying that their country was sold out. Like, whoa, shocker, that's totally not why America was invested in Ukraine in the first place. Whoa, so shocking, right? It's like they can literally just go and get rid of the government. They did it once, they did it twice, they can do it 3 times. Wait, how many times did they do it? I think 1, 2. I think they did like 3. They did it like 2. Like, they did it a good 2 times. All right, they did it a good 2 times. If they like to overthrow government so much, why can't they just get up and go overthrow the current government that's causing this whole mess in the first place? That literally just sold out their country. Well, of course they can't, because unfortunately they're too brainwashed. They're too brainwashed to understand that their country is being sold out. They hate Russia too much. They're brainwashed by too much anti-Russian propaganda. That instead of focusing on the fact that their country is literally just being thrown to the wolves, no, it's Russians bad. Russia bad. That's more important.
Kuchma was now forced to choose between a Tiananmen Square-style crackdown or backing down. He backed down and cut a deal with Yushchenko to allow for a new, fair election.
про оприлюднення результатів повторного голосування 26 грудня 2004 року з виборів президента України. Ющенко Віктор Андрійович, 15 мільйонів 115 тисяч.
And so Viktor Yushchenko became the third president of Ukraine, and Yulia Tymoshenko was announced as being his prime minister. But this begs the question. Ukraine was run by oligarchs, and it continued to be run by oligarchs. Was this really a revolution? Yes and no. First, let's talk about what we mean when we say Ukraine is an oligarchy. When we say America is an oligarchy, we just mean there's too much income inequality, and also we really need campaign finance reform. And when we say Putin's Russia is an oligarchy, we mean Putin has a bunch of billionaires who have to act as his capos, or else. But in Ukraine, oligarchy is literal. Everyone who gets rich gets into politics. The reason is called parliamentary privilege. If you have a seat in parliament, you can't be investigated and charged with a crime, unless the rest of parliament agrees to strip you of your privilege. And even a legitimate businessman will need that privilege to avoid getting squeezed by a prosecutor with connections to an even bigger oligarch. So it's financial suicide not to run for office after making a lot of money, either by forming your own party or bribing a major party into giving you a slot on their candidate list. This practice is so wide.
Wow, guys, that's the democracy that the West, the bastion of democracy that Ukraine is, that the West love to portray. Ah, yes, boys. Such a mighty democracy. Wow, amazing. So free and so fair. Wow. Again, remember when I said that Ukraine was corrupted as shit when I asked what the people were even fighting for? Like, I remember, like, all of this is like pre-war. Has nothing to do with Russia, just how Ukraine was.
It spread that by the early 2000s, oligarchs were buying spots on lists not for themselves, but as speculatory investments. But in Ukraine, there is no class solidarity among oligarchs, mainly because they represent different sectors of the economy and come from different parts of the country, and they regularly attack and snitch on one another in parliament. The Orange Revolution was on a surface level just the victory of one clan of oligarchs over the other. But on another level, it was a revolution in a relationship between the oligarchs and the middle class. Because there's no solidarity among oligarchs, any oligarch could immediately ride to power by throwing in their lot with the middle class civil society groups. Which means in Ukrainian oligarchy, unlike in Russian oligarchy, civil society doesn't get to rule, but it does get to play kingmaker. And that diversification of power redounded down to the media. The news stations all had to compete instead of colluding. There was just one problem. Yushchenko and Tymoshenko don't actually like each other. In fact, they hate each other and are terrible at working together. And the enmity mostly seemed to be personal. Within 2 years, Yushchenko had fired her. And after new parliamentary elections made hiring anyone else impossible, he chose over her Viktor Yanukovich, a man who had previously just tried to murder him. Only to again get into a power struggle with Yanukovych, fire him, bring back Yulia after finding no better option, only to get fed up with her again and start trying to illegally call new early elections. On virtually every issue, the three of them ran into gridlock. When one switched positions on a law, the other would also switch, just out of spite. And that didn't change when the mortgage crisis hit. On top of that,
What the What the heck? Oh god, I've never seen the politics that awful in my life. Ugh.
And choking off the flow of natural gas to Ukraine in the middle of winter. This forced Tymoshenko to negotiate a new natural gas deal at a much higher price. That deal cratered her popularity, and Yushchenko began openly accusing her of being a traitor and a tool of Putin. By their last 2 years in government, Yulia and Yushchenko were just actively trying to sabotage one another. This set the perfect stage for Yanukovych to make a comeback. Now that Ukraine had an American-style electoral system, Yanukovych dumped his Russian advisors and got American ones, and they got to work selling him as the perfect candidate to get Ukraine into the EU, which was a core issue for Kyiv's middle class. See, for all the talk about pro-Western or pro-Russian politicians, all politicians have to both keep Russia happy and keep Ukraine on path to European integration.
So, hold on a second. Okay, so isn't this the guy who Ukrainians say was like so pro-Russia. Guys, I know he wasn't like extremely pro-Russia. He was leaning towards Russia, but he wasn't really pro-Russia. This is so he like dumped all his Russian advisors, but he's supposed to be like super duper pro-Russia according to like the official narrative. Oh my god. I gotta post a lot of clips on my TikTok.
Yanukovych was no different. Why do Ukrainians need the EU and every other country seems to want to flee it? Well, reason one is just empirical. Ukraine looks at a country like Poland, which in the early 90s was in the same place as Ukraine, but is now 3 times richer. Reason two, the
Wow. Look at that. Look at that. Wow. And it's still poor as hell today. Golly. Ah, yes. Remember what I said about Ukraine? Like, why do you guys still support Ukraine? Alright, I'm gonna talk about this real quick, right? Do you know what would happen if, like, Ukraine would just, like, stop fighting? Do you know? Well, it would become a place like Belarus, most likely. I don't know. But Belarus is better than what the fuck is going on in Ukraine. Let's be honest here, folks. Would you rather live in Belarus or would you rather live in Ukraine? Pre-war stats. In terms of just wealth. Okay, just put all the propaganda shit aside for a second. Like, in terms of just wealth. Like, yeah, I would obviously pick Belarus. Okay. Again, what did I say about Ukraine in one of my old ass videos from like a year ago? The country should not be poor. The country should not be poor. Okay, it has so much natural gas, so much oil, it's literally called a breadbasket of Europe, for Christ's sakes. It's literally like the geography is perfect. It should not be poor. It makes no sense why it's poor. Why does no one not think of this? Guys, this was some of the reasons like that turned my mind from Ukraine when I used to be brainwashed with Ukrainian propaganda. Like at first it was the fact they were poor as shit. I was like, wait, how is a country like that this poor? That was one of the reasons. Then I heard about the corruption. I was like, okay, they're poor as shit, they're corrupted as shit. Okay, but I just brushed it off. Again, this is all when I was a kid, growing up. I mean, there's more to it, guys. It was just like a big snowball where I just kept seeing more and more and more information. I'm just like, yeah, no. That is crazy. A GDP per capita of 3,000. What the heck? That's mad, bro. That's actually insane. But yeah, if Ukraine just does stop fighting, just literally just stop fighting right now, their lives will be so much better. But it literally would be. We see it with Mariupol. We see how Russia treated Mariupol. Treated Mariupol so well, so much better than other regions of Russia, that I saw so many Russian people were pissed, extremely angry, because they were like, wait, what the hell? We don't get this treatment. And why do they get this treatment? Oh, but you might be saying, oh, but bro, Mariupol, there's a water shortage right now, bruh. There's a water shortage. Yeah, because there's a war going on. Duh. Like, if the war literally had to end, this broke ass country that Ukraine is, it would just vanish. Like, the lives of Ukrainians would literally just be instantly better, because the Russian government would actually make use of all the damn resources that apparently Ukraine can't use. I don't know how it can't use it. Well, I do know how it used it, because it deindustrialized after the fall of the USSR. That's how bad things have gotten, but that's a whole different topic to talk about. But yeah, it will be able to use all the trillions of dollars worth of shit that Ukraine has. You see, Ukrainians are so brainwashed that they don't even understand that that would literally help them. They care so much about having such a better life. Okay, then just surrender to Russia. Simple as that. Again, look at the Russian occupied areas. Look at what Russia's already doing to the lands it already occupies. It would do the same shit to all of this. For Christ's sakes, man. But anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself.
EU creates a critical check on the power of oligarchs and their corruption. Joining the EU transforms Ukraine's oligarchs from being big fish in a little pond to small fish in a big pond. If a Ukrainian billionaire bribes or threatens a Ukrainian official, they'll likely get what they want. But if that same billionaire tries the same thing on a European bureaucrat, the response would be something like, "I'm sorry? Who are you? Am I supposed to be scared? Yeah, no. Come back when you've killed as many people as Deutsche Bank, thanks." And reason 3, even the oligarchs want to go to the EU because what they lose in power, they gain in the ability to go legit and cash out for huge profits. And so Yanukovych used the fact that he was seen as Russia's guy to pitch himself as the perfect leader to get Ukraine in the EU while not setting off Russia. So after he won, Yanukovych got to appeasing the Russians. He signed a 30-year lease for the Russian naval base in Crimea, which would disqualify Ukraine from joining NATO for an entire generation. And just to drive the point home, the parliament passed a law forbidding the president from joining any new foreign alliances.
So, let's talk about that real quick, right? According to the official narrative, Russia is an expansionist power. Russia is an expansionist power that just wants to conquer everybody. That's the official stupid anti-Russian narrative. I'm just going to debunk this right now. Okay, so if Russia is an expansionist power, why the hell were they willfully paying Ukraine to lease Sevastopol to Russia? Willfully, out of their own accord, giving money to Ukraine for the Sevastopol naval base, for Christ's sakes. Guys, this is common sense. Guys, again, this is another reason why I eventually just like realized that, oh my god, I was brainwashed. Because this is basic common sense. Because when I realized this, I was like, wait a minute. If Russia wants to expand, why were they doing that? Why didn't they just take it? That didn't make any sense, because there's more to the story. Because Russia is not expansionist. It's not. If you're so expansionist, for God's sakes, you don't willfully go and rent a piece of someone's territory and supposedly give money to the people you're going to conquer. What type of logic is that? All you brainwash Ukrainians, like seriously, like sit down and think about that, because I'm gonna post this clip on my TikTok too. All you brainwash Ukrainians watching this on my TikTok right now, sit down and think about that. Not just that, but Russia does the same thing with Kazakhstan. They literally right now, as we speak, are renting a piece of territory from Kazakhstan to use to launch ships into space. Like a big chunk. But wait, I thought Russia is supposed to be expansionist. Why doesn't it just not take it? In fact, actually, I'm just going to drop this right now. If Russia is so expansionist, why does it just not conquer all of Central Asia, for goodness sakes? It's like, why does no one not think of this shit? It's basic common sense. Just sit down and think of this shit, for goodness sakes. I mean, Central Asia is riddled with resources. It already is largely Russian speaking. So why doesn't Russia just not conquer? It's much more weaker. Much more weaker. So why doesn't Russia just go and conquer? Again, I'm just going by the stupid propaganda narrative that Russia wants to conquer the whole world, and Russia is expansionist, and Russia invades its neighbors. I'm just going by that stupid narrative. I'm just debunking that. Again, just simple, basic, damn common sense. Why the hell is Russia literally paying Kazakhstan to rent a piece of its land when Russia is literally strong enough that it could just go and take that shit by force? Like, to all the stupid brainwashed Ukrainians out there, for goodness sakes. When will you niggas understand that you're brainwashed? No, there are some Ukrainians that know that I've met some Ukrainians who aren't brainwashed, and they know, like, yeah, like, it's just bullshit. Like, I talked to this one guy from freaking Crimea who lives in Crimea. He was Ukrainian. And I looked at him and I was like, yeah, I really hate Ukrainian people because they're annoying as shit and their personality is shit. But that's a whole different video. A whole different video. And he was like, well, yeah, that's because they were subjected to a whole bunch of stupid propaganda brainwashing in the past decade. So yeah, they're gonna be like that. So I'm like, wait, so you don't even deny that Ukrainians are brainwashed? And he was like, no, I don't. So yeah, not all Ukrainians are like this. In fact, I've seen Ukrainians themselves. You know what? I'm like getting ahead of myself. Let me pause and just continue this.
These moves were divisive.
Щиняється бійка між регіоналами і нунцівцями. Усе це не заважає спікеру відкрити засідання. У залі реєструється 211 депутатів, менша частина від депутатського складу.
But they passed. But Yanukovych had another agenda. Revenge. Now, let's step back 4 years. When Yanukovych was prime minister, mostly it was impossible to privatize anything because the socialists held key veto points. He was, however, able to bribe the socialists into privatizing one government asset, a massive manor that had previously been the summer house for the leaders of the Communist Party. Yanukovych had managed to sell this place off at a low price to a little-known investor named Viktor Yanukovych. And when Yanukovych and Yulia ran against each other in the 2010 presidential election, she called him out for this and implicitly threatened to renationalize the mansion. So, when Yanukovych became president, he threw her in jail.
Сьогодні я ще на свободі, але завтра вже буду за ґратами.
But that left the question of what crime to actually charge her with, since she had kept her nose clean since entering politics. So Yanukovych used the unpopular gas deal she had negotiated with Russia, arguing that she had agreed to a bad deal on purpose as part of a secret bargain with Putin, and had betrayed Ukraine. And Viktor Yushchenko, though he knew better, agreed to play along and testify against her. To the EU, this seemed like major democratic backsliding, so they made releasing Yulia from jail one of the preconditions for EU membership. So to get the EU off his back, Yanukovych funded a massive smear campaign against Yulia, both domestically and internationally. His team shopped out stories to conservative media outlets in Israel, Europe, and the US, making her out to be an anti-Semite and a Putin stooge. You might remember this story because one of the political pundits that took part was Ben Shapiro. But again, the Kremlin wasn't in on the joke, and this media campaign smeared Putin as a side effect of it smearing Yulia, which said...
So, hold on a second. Holy shit. This is the guy who was eventually overthrown in the illegal coup in 2014 in Maidan. And what Ukrainians will say is, oh, he was a Russian puppet. Okay. So if he's a Russian puppet, why the fuck is he doing this? If he's a Russian puppet, why the fuck is he literally slandering Putin's name? I want to know. I again, according to the official narrative, again, I don't believe in the official narrative. I'm just repeating it for obvious reasons, so that people understand. Because guys, I make this type of stuff for people who have common sense. For people to just sit down and just think, wait a minute. I need to rethink this. So for all the people with common sense, according to the official Ukrainian narrative, I'm going to repeat myself here. Yanukovych was a Russian puppet selling Ukraine out to Russia. Yeah, he's backtracking Putin here and slandering Putin's name for his own gain. Something that, well, as he just said, Putin did not like. That doesn't make any sense. How are you a Russian puppet and you're doing that? Yeah, no. Again, Christ's sakes.
Sent the Russians into a paranoid frenzy. A leaked document from the Kremlin showed that even before shit went down later, they were already convinced that Yanukovych and most of his oligarchs had turned against Russia, and that it would only be a matter of time before there was a second Orange Revolution that would destroy relations between Ukraine and Russia for good.
So Putin, holy shit. So Russia didn't even trust Yanukovych. Wow. They didn't even trust Yanukovych. They literally thought the man was anti-Russian. The same man who, according to Ukrainian narrative, was a Russian dog, was a Russian puppy. That's crazy.
Yanukovych was oblivious to all this. So he went on trying to court Europe for a good deal, and it seemed like he was making progress. Right up until 2013, when suddenly Russia decides to just start sanctioning Ukraine, and says they're going to keep sanctioning Ukraine until it drops out of the EU negotiations. Europe and America treated this as a bargaining war with fairly low stakes. Russia treated it as an existential crisis. Russia's main envoy to Ukraine, Sergei Glaziev, even threatened that signing the association agreement would nullify Ukraine's statehood and would lead to a Russian military intervention. And Yanukovych thinks, okay, so this is clearly a misunderstanding. Since I solved the whole NATO problem, I just need to reassure Putin. So Yanukovych and Putin have a meeting. We don't know what happened in this meeting. What we do know is that immediately after, Yanukovych came to the EU negotiators and said he would need a huge amount of money from the IMF, something on the order of $50 billion, in order to offset something to do with Russia. Because Europe and the IMF didn't know just how strong the threats had been behind closed doors, they assumed this was a cynical cash grab.
If Mr. Yanukovych thinks that the European Union should give him money, he should become very concrete and ask how much and in which way and under which circumstances.
And the EU was already inclined to see the Ukraine as more of a burden than an opportunity. So they didn't bite. So Yanukovych walked away from Europe with nothing.
President Viktor Yanukovych has said he's only suspending, not cancelling Ukraine's planned deal on closer ties with the EU and still intends to sign an agreement at a later date. There's no change to our plans. We think we can sign once we get down to work and find solutions for economic problems.
But failure wasn't really an option for Yanukovych. He had won his election on a promise that he would get Ukraine into the EU, and now it looked like he had just been stringing everyone along.
Почему так мало людей? Вот в 5-миллионном городе вот сюда вот пришли только вот полсотни человек.
Півгодини тому тут стояло.
So, okay, because I know. Should I talk about this? Look, the only thing that I'm gonna say is, yeah, Yanukovych wasn't a Russian puppet. Like I do know that there were horrible misnegotiations that were going on in the background to where Yanukovych just came out empty-handed. Like, I do know that. But again, according to the official Ukrainian narrative, no. Yanukovych just suddenly just sided with Russia. And then, oh my gosh, Maidan happened and the peaceful protesters were shut up, blah, 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 blah. I'm getting ahead of myself.
10 людей. Огляніться, скільки зараз. І це тільки початок. Сьогодні збереться декілька сотень, можливо, тисяча. Завтра збереться 10 тисяч. Післязавтра збереться 100 тисяч, а потім піднімуться мільйони.
In the Ukraine, thousands of anti-government demonstrators turned out again today, and some opposition leaders called for nationwide strikes after a night of bloody clashes between protesters and police.
Hundreds of thousands of protesters have stormed the streets of the Ukrainian capital in recent days, upset that the country's president, Viktor Yanukovych, walked away from a deal with the European Union after warnings from Russia.
The thing you realize as you watch and read most of the journalism about Euromaidan is that it's almost impossible not to get swept away with the ultra-violent spectacle. Every report slowly bleeds into the same montage of blood-soaked scalps, burning tires, and candid snuff films. So instead I'll try to focus on the politics. Originally, support for the protests mostly only came from the sectors of the country that hated Yanukovych already. But the crackdowns were so excessive, it spread the backlash rather than crushing the movement. And soon the leaders of the three biggest opposition parties had positioned themselves as the leaders of the movement. Those three men were 1. Arseny Yatsenyuk, a young technocrat who had taken the lead of Yulia Tymoshenko's party while she was in prison, Vitaly Klitschko, the former heavyweight champion who ended up inheriting what was left of Yushchenko's base after he left the presidency, and Oleg Tyenebok, the slightly creepy leader of the crypto-Nazi Svoboda Party, who had found unprecedented success in the last round of parliamentary elections by moderating his image and by selling himself as a protest vote. And maybe because of all the money and free publicity he was getting from Yanukovych's party in the hopes that Yanukovych could run against him instead of a more formidable opponent. As the movement got bigger and more institutionalized, Yanukovych got scared. So he went a step further and tried to pass an anti-protest bill so vague it could plausibly criminalize just about anything. And that scared everyone in Ukraine. Protests spread to Yanukovych's part of the country in the south and the east. With his political base ready to disown him, Yanukovych had no choice but to start negotiating. Russia took this as a sign that they were right about Yanukovych, that he was going to betray them, especially when they found out the American embassy was arbitrating the negotiations. So they put more pressure on him to break off negotiations and instead end the protests with overwhelming force. Yanukovych was trapped between a rock and a hard place, and his own party and security services were divided between hardliners and Democrats. Shortly after, the shooting started.
Yeah, that's what I do know about Yanukovych. Yeah, he was literally like stuck. Like, I feel so bad for the poor guy, to be honest. Like, he there was no good choices. It's like Russia thought that he was gonna turn Ukraine away from Russia, and was literally they were on the verge of just intervening militarily. So he couldn't just do that, which is hilarious that Ukrainians don't talk about that him backing away from the EU, one of the reasons being why is that he was trying to prevent Russia from literally militarily intervening in the country. So he was protecting Ukraine from Russia. Interesting. And then if he didn't, well, he'll make the people mad. You know what I interpret all of this as? Simple. Well, to be honest, I can't even blame anyone because everyone was literally naive here. Russia didn't know what was truly going on. The Ukrainian people didn't know what was truly going on. The EU didn't even know what the hell was going on because Yanukovych didn't really give any details on why he needed $50 billion and what the hell he and Putin talked about. Yanukovych was honestly the only person who kind of knew what the hell was going on here, but he was stuck in a deadlock because nobody besides him knew what was going on. And yeah, well, it's a lose-lose situation.
The police are shooting directly at protesters.
Here, a CNN photographer captures the moment when a group of medics is seen helping a man lying on the ground. There is a shot. One medic falls to the ground and tries to crawl away. We don't know if he survived.
The death toll is still being counted, but in our hotel, which became a makeshift hospital run by volunteer doctors, 13 bodies were brought into reception.
Yanukovych, like Kuchma before him, realized he was either going to have to sign a deal or spark a civil war. So negotiations started to form a new unity government. Yanukovych would stay president, the leadership troika.
So the police started shooting on their own accord. According to the official narrative, the protesters protesters were shot at by police because they were given orders by the Yanukovych government to just start opening fire on them. But during all of this crisis, Yanukovych was still trying to find a solution to this. Sounds a lot different from the official narrative that I keep on hearing.
Of the protests would get jobs as prime minister.
Which is hilarious because I always knew that Yanukovych wasn't as pro-Russia as people said that he was. I always knew that. Like
minister and his deputies, and they would all act as caretakers until the next election later that year.
Flanked by European foreign ministers, a stern-looking Yanukovych signed the deal. Of note, the Russian envoy refused to witness it, so the deal stands, but there's no certainty it will last. In a moment that wasn't supposed to be caught on camera, the Polish foreign minister warned the opposition, sign it or else.
And then just before Yanukovych was about to implement that deal, the deal that would have saved Ukraine from chaos, he just suddenly got cold feet.
The president tonight is in hiding, and just look at the images coming in now. Families wandering the grounds of his luxury home outside the capital today, taking turns playing on his private golf course, helping themselves to his golf clubs.
Can I very quickly just ask you, do you know where Viktor Yanukovych is right now?
It's a good question. Millions of Ukrainians want to know where is Yanukovych.
Jubilation on the streets of the Ukrainian capital.
Western media spun this as a story of people power scaring away a big bad dictator, but the truth was much more sinister. While the crowd was angry about the
Wait, what happened?
Media spun this as a story
That's him?
of people power scaring away a big bad dictator, but the truth was much more sinister. While the crowd was angry about the shootings, it shouldn't have been impossible to pacify them once the deal was signed and the Maidan triumvirate was on Yanukovych's side. But one of the annexes of the agreement was that there would be an investigation into who shot who on the 20th, and the leaders of Yanukovych's security forces either thought or were convinced by someone that Yanukovych was getting ready to throw them under the bus. So they decided to betray him first. Someone in the chain of command between Yanukovych and the riot cops ordered the cops to withdraw from all government buildings, and they, along with their boss, just disappeared. They would reappear a few weeks later either in Russia or in Crimea, which was already in the process of being invaded by Russia. There was now no one standing between Yanukovych and the angry protesters except the far-right militias who were acting as Maidan security forces. Which means Yanukovych would have to renegotiate his resignation with absolutely zero leverage. Or, he could sneak out with as much of his expensive stuff as he could stuff into a hip helicopter. But for now, all you...
So, Yanukovych was betrayed. No, I mean, he's... Okay, so he's talking about this from a very objective standpoint. But he's also ignoring the ultra right wing group, which orchestrated the whole coup d'etat on the Pravi sector, the right sector. Even Yanukovych himself said that, like, in the final hours, like the final days, final hours, like, he didn't realize it was a coup until it was too late. And when he realized it was a coup, it was like I guess because the security was all gone, like it made sense. But when he realized it was a coup, it was like, okay, yeah, you can't do nothing, bro. It's like, you got to dip. Honestly, he did gloss over that detail, which is interesting because he was literally going to sign the deal, and so hold on a second. So he was gonna sign the deal that all the Ukrainians were basically bitching about, and the reason why he didn't is because all the angry protesters forced him to flee. Now, there was more to it, but I'm just just wording it that way to just make you sit down and think. If the people weren't angrily protesting, and there was also that ultra right wing group which freaking cooed the whole country. They used the protesters. Here's the thing: there were two types. There were the regular protesters, and then there were the ultra right wing people who were in the protesting, but they used the protesters basically as a shield and to mask themselves of what they're actually planning to do. That I do know. That's crazy.
Ukrainians knew as their president had ghosted, and they would need to move fast to prevent the state from collapsing. So even Yanukovych's own party threw their hands up in frustration and voted to kick him out of office and put in a provisional government. Yanukovych showed up again in Russia, claiming
what the heck? Okay, yeah, he is missing some stuff here. He completely ignores the fact that there is a first vote to impeach him, and it failed. He ignored. He completely glossed over that. I thought he would have thought about that. He brought that up. It was when Yanukovych was failed to be impeached. That was when the protests really got bad. That was when he decided to just oust him. Interesting. The way how he worded it is interesting. But no, Yanukovych was the legitimate president of Ukraine still. That's the crazy part. The first vote when he was still in Ukraine, it failed.
the vote to remove him was unconstitutional and that he was still the president, which was probably true, but there's a remedy for that.
Yeah, literally. You know, it's funny because I've argued with like so many Ukrainians, right? And they'll be like, oh, but the Ukrainian constitution says blah blah. I'm like, okay, cool. If the Ukrainian constitution says this, right? Okay, why don't you bring up the fact that Yanukovych is literally still the legitimate president of Ukraine up to this day? Why don't you bring up the fact that he was literally illegally removed if you just use the Ukrainian constitution? But this guy, I don't know, the way how he's wording it is kind of dishonest. Like, no, he says, and he's probably right. No, he is right. Like, he's still the legitimate president. Also, not only that, but even we see ABC News. The president refuses to resign. Yanukovych, president refuses to resign. Yeah. Let me let this play first.
Come back and challenge it in court. And he was literally refusing to come back because of some phantom assassination plot he refused to explain. Whether this was because he genuinely didn't feel safe or if Russia had his back to the wall, he was now giving Russia the pretext they wanted to deliver on their previous threat.
Yeah, no. Okay, yeah, this guy's being dishonest. No, like, he was literally right. Like, no. Like, no, like, guys, I literally argue with Ukrainians and I make up this extremely valid point. You don't just get up and leave your position of power. No normal human being does that. If you are in a position of power, who the hell is in a position of power and just gets up and just like, yeah, I don't really like my position of power. I don't really like my position of wealth. Yeah, I'm just gonna go and abandon all of it. You don't just do that, for Christ's sakes. Unless something forces you, unless there's an external threat. Only something like that will make someone leave their position of power. So no, he actually was threatened. I know that's why he fled to Russia. If he didn't, he would have been dead. Seriously. So no, he's absolutely correct. And no, this video is being dishonest now.
Никто меня не свергнул. Я вынужден был покинуть Украину под непосредственной угрозой своей жизни и жизни своих близких.
Not that Russia had waited for his permission.
Yeah, and guess what? So let me tell you something, right? If you go by the Ukrainian constitution, Yanukovych is literally still the legitimate president of Ukraine because he's still alive. Every single other president after that is illegitimate. And he literally asked for Russian help. So, just sit down and think for a second here, folks. The legitimate president of Ukraine under the Ukrainian constitution, who was forced to flee Russia, who they literally failed to vote him out in the first impeachment process. So he's still a legitimate president of Ukraine. I have to say this. I have to repeat the fact that he's still the president of Ukraine because of what I'm about to say. To all the people who says that Russia has no legitimate reason to invade Ukraine. The legitimate president of Ukraine fled to Russia and he asked for Russia for help. There you go. There you go. So why the hell do we care about Ukraine? Why are we involved in something that has nothing to do with us? Why should we care about this shit? This is why I'm pro-Russia. Let them sort that out on their own. Let them do that shit on their own. Why are we getting involved? We have our own matters to deal with. Seriously. There are wars in Africa right now no one gives a shit about. Oh, everyone just like, oh well, let them sort it out on their own. Why the hell are we not doing the same thing to Ukraine? There is nothing special about Ukraine. Oh, because all this stupid anti-Russian propaganda. All the garbage anti-Russian propaganda. The legitimate president of Ukraine, who's literally still the legitimate president of Ukraine, asks for Russian help. So it's hilarious because the whole Russian invasion of Ukraine is legit. If you just use the Ukrainian constitution. The sovereign of Ukraine, to all the people who say like, oh, Ukraine's sovereignty is broken. The sovereign of Ukraine, the president of Ukraine, when you're the president, you're the sovereign of the country. The sovereign of Ukraine went to Russia. He even said that he refused to resign. He even said he was still the president of Ukraine under the constitution. If you just go by that. Asked for Russia to intervene, asked for Russia to do something. So it doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter. I'm not repeating bullshit propaganda. You're gonna say that the Ukrainian constitution is fucking Russian propaganda too? You're gonna say that too? To all the people who accuse me of being a fucking Russian bot? You know, it's funny because the whole reason, like, all the information that I got on this conflict was barely from Russia. Barely from Russia. Here, all from Western sources. Oh, Ukraine's sovereignty was broken. Oh, and then I have to talk about fucking Crimea next, because people say that Crimea, Russia invaded fucking Crimea when that never happened.
Many of the country's news stations in the east are controlled by a pro-Kremlin oligarch, and when Yanukovych fled, they started running scare stories about how the new government was full of Nazis who would make speaking Russian illegal. This spurred protests in the mostly Russian-speaking cities in the south and the east of the country. Then, in a sort of parody of the original Maidan...
No! That's not true! That's not true! What the fuck? This video has some dishonesty to it. No. Okay, why should you trust what I have to say? Because for goodness sakes, Ukraine is ultra racist, even for Eastern European levels, bruh. Ultra racist as hell. They literally wear Nazi symbols on their uniform to the point where even Germany, when so many Ukrainian refugees were coming to
Germany, because these symbols are banned in Germany had to be like, don't bring that shit here. Don't bring that shit here. Like, Germany had to make sure. That's how bad it was, especially when they were donating shit to Ukraine. What else? Oh, they worship Nazi collaborators from World War II. Bandera. Oh my God, they worship this nigga like he's Jesus Christ, who literally orchestrated the Lviv genocide. A big Nazi collaborator. Oh, he's a national hero in Ukraine now. Remember the Lviv genocide? What did he do to the Lviv genocide? And I quote, cleanse the country for a future Ukrainian state only for Ukrainians that is pure of Ukrainians. Doesn't that sound familiar? It almost sounds like a certain guy who had a weird mustache who wanted to do the exact same thing to Eastern Europe, who really did not like Eastern Slavic people, and he was an Austrian painter. I don't know, man. Maybe it's just me.
Russia organized mini coups in all the regional capitals of oblasts where Yanukovych had won. Using the protests as cover, those new fake coup governments could declare themselves independent republics and then ask Putin for humanitarian intervention. At the time, people thought these were spontaneous.
Okay, yeah, no. Okay. Yeah, no. No. Like the whole reason why Donbass left Ukraine in the first place was like as soon as Yanukovych fled and Maidan happened and the ultra right wing government took power, which is extremely, even he himself in the video literally fucking said that they were extremely anti-Russian in the first place. Yeah, they didn't want no part of that. Understandably so. The fuck? Understandably so, bro. I mean, for goodness sakes, he himself literally said that the people in the East felt insulted by the ultra right-wing people, like at good early in the video, that they felt more of an insult by the ultra right-wing people due to the fact that they literally, essentially worshipped the very people that their grandparents, the Nazis, had to fight against. That their grandparents had to liberate their country from the fucking Nazis. Yeah, these people were fucking worshipping the fucking Nazis. That's why the people in the Far East weren't really, they didn't really like those people from the right-wing groups. Yeah, I mean, he says so in the video. I'm just repeating shit at this point. But I don't know, but like, did he forget what he said? What the fuck? I don't know. Like, I don't know. I feel like maybe he's just trying to be objective here. Maybe he's just trying to be fucking objective. And he doesn't want to be accused of being like a Russian bot or whatever. So he's just like saying this shit. But no. There were volunteers from Russia that were sent into Ukraine. But any country can literally make a fucking volunteer group and go to a conflict zone. That's normal. But no, Russia really didn't have anything to do here. I mean, yeah, Russia did fund some shit. Russia sent funds to like the people who were rebelling. Well, yeah. But Russia didn't really do anything like crazy until 2022. Like it couldn't. It physically couldn't. It literally could not.
Protests. We only discovered otherwise because the phone call in which Sergei Glazyev directed and talked about cash payments for the protesters was leaked. It didn't work. It turns out you cannot actually sustain a revolution with 200 paid thugs. That is, except in Crimea. Because in Crimea, they had help.
Извините, вы можете сказать, из какой базы вы, из какой страны? Вы можете ответить на какой-нибудь вопрос? Yeah, they don't want to say anything. They're not wearing any insignia.
Oh my god, a leaked phone call, guys. Oh, boom. Boom. Checkmate. Wow, one leaked phone call. Whoa. Number one, sure. I even said this. Russia literally did provide funds to some of these people that were rebelling against Ukraine. But no, most people who were doing that shit, that was genuine. That was pure fucking no. That was purely genuine stuff there that was going on. I mean, for fuck's sake, how the hell does Donbass even like sure, there's gonna be some people who are probably bribed, but like, to get to the point where you get a whole civil war in the East, yeah, no, nah, bruh. There's more to it than just one fucking phone call. It's just one fucking phone call where you just talk about just paying niggas to just go and protest. Honestly, that could be interpreted in so many ways. It's not even a joke.
But it's pretty clear that they're Russian.
Spetsnaz units without insignia had simply landed outside the city, marched in, disarmed the police, and simply put the local military installation under a light siege.
To what America is officially calling a Russian invasion of Ukraine. Russian troops spreading out throughout the strategic Crimean Peninsula. President Obama speaking with Russian President Vladimir Putin, apparently pulling no punches, although it is unclear what the White House can really do about all of this. At
which point, a referendum for more autonomy was called for May. But then that referendum was immediately canceled and replaced with a new one about joining Russia to be held 2 weeks from now. And 2 weeks later, joining Russia won 95% of the vote.
He completely just ignores the fact that Crimea declared independence from you. He's just leaving out details. Okay, no, he's just being dishonest. Where's the part where Crimea declared independence from Ukraine? What? Oh, that's crazy, bro. That's crazy. Crimea declared independence from Ukraine. So really and truly, was it really Russia invaded Ukraine, or was it just Russia's walking into Crimea? Again, there's so much dishonesty that you need to just sit down and think about. And not only that, but he's kind of cherry picking too, especially with that phone call shit. Very, he talks about so much dishonesty on journalism, but yeah, he's very being very dishonest.
With 90% turnout, which was quite an achievement considering only 60% of the population was ethnically Russian. Up to this point, the stakes of Ukraine's fake cable news culture war had just been hurt feelings. Now the stakes are existential because one side thought the other were bloodthirsty Nazis intent on killing all Russians and
because they were
put in power by the American government. And the other saw their opponent
because they were. You're literally like brainwashed to hate Russia. Like, bruh. It's insane. I'll talk more about that in another video, but dude, they're literally like, bro, Ukrainians are just so, it's like the only thing that they know, just to hate Russia, bro. It's mad.
As fifth columnist in a foreign invasion. The Ukrainian state was on the brink. People were dying. And Vladimir Putin was sitting pretty. And here's where I'm going to pause, because here is where the actual mystery starts. Putin has conquered a piece of territory Russian nationalists have wanted back since 1991. His approval ratings are through the roof. Ukraine now cannot join NATO because the NATO charter specifically forbids entry for any country with an outstanding territorial dispute. And Ukraine's nationalists have now suffered a huge black eye because they let a chunk of territory go without a fight. If Putin walks away here, he walks away with everything he wants. But instead of doing that, he...
Okay, yeah. Okay, I thought this was gonna be like a objective video standpoint. At first he was like going good, but then I started noticing like how he's just like ignoring details. He ignored the fact that Yanukovych was illegally ousted. He completely ignored the Pravi sector, the right sector, who orchestrated the whole coup, who used the protesters to mask what was actually going on. He dishonestly said, oh, Yanukovych is probably still the president, when he literally still was. That was very dishonest. Cherry picks a phone call and just says, yes, this one phone call proves that all of the protesters were just funded purposely funded by Russia. One fucking phone call. Oh, and he also ignores the Odessa protest where the Odessa fire begins. He also ignores that shit too, where 70 people died in the Odessa fire. He completely ignores that as well. That's pretty. 7 pro-Russia people who are genuinely protesting were murdered, literally basically murdered by, I don't know, pro-Maidan, Ukraine, whatever the hell you want to call them, counter-protesters. He ignores that. Completely ignores the fact that Crimea declared independence first from Ukraine, then voted to join Russia. What else did he say that was pretty dishonest? I don't know. But yeah, I'm just listing some stuff here so that you can't say that, oh, you're the one that's brainwashed. Like, no. Oh, and now he's saying that Putin fucking started a war in Donbass. Oh my god. Anyways, if you like my reactions, if you like what I have to say regarding these videos and whatnot, you can go like, subscribe. If you have any videos that you want me to see, you would love to hear my takes on, you would like to see my reactions, you can always commentate in the comments below. Yeah, eventually I'll do it. You know, I'll watch it. Yeah, I mean, it's a good video, but the dishonesty is kind of ugh. But anyways.